before I get started, one of the things I want to play off of some other things that have been made is the real importance for access and egress of cooperation between the state agency and the contractor. I'm going to give a specific example of a site that I was on. We were working in the median. There wasn't a single person that did bleep about the access and egress to that site. Okay? The truckers were complaining. The quality control contractors were complaining. The paving company was complaining. The state agency was complaining. And nobody was doing a bleep thing about it. Okay? Everybody knows it's a problem, but nobody's doing something about it. So going back to some of the other things is, as state agencies, you need to start training your people about how to work with contractors to solve problems in the field. And as contractors, you need to talk with your people about how to talk with state agencies about solving problems in the field. And I'm not talking about getting it done in 3 weeks. The fact that there wasn't a multi-million-dollar lawsuit on this particular job site is just amazing to me. And everyone knew it. It was an accident waiting to happen. It was a death waiting to happen. Nobody did anything about it. Why do I speak so passionately? I had to move in and out of that work zone every day as well. As did all the truck drivers who were complaining, as did all the QC, QA personnel who were complaining, as did all the state inspectors who were complaining. Okay, so I think I've kind of beat that dead horse really well, but you really need to look at that. I can't really talk about internal traffic control plans without giving her due to Jennifer, who's become my project officer on all of this as well. So thank you very much. As well as to everyone who allowed us to be on site and work with us. And as I said the other day, for those who weren't over here, the respect I have for every man and woman who works in these incredible, chaotic situations. I refer to the paving process as unorganized chaos that somehow works. So the idea of the internal traffic control plan is to try to convert it into some sort of a coordinated chaos that works better. Of course, I have to tell you that these findings are my own talking and aren't really the agency's because they aren't official, because it's a presentation, and any products that I mentioned I really didn't mean to. All the information that I'm going to talk about today really is I'm going to try to give you a little background on what is an internal traffic control plan, and then refer specifically to a few access egress issues. The traffic control plan is designed, the traffic control plan that we all know and have talked about for years, is really designed to make sure that the motorists can navigate our work zone safely, plain and simple. Laborers coined the term internal traffic control plan about 10, 12 years ago, saying we want to do the same thing inside that gray box. It's in all of our traffic control plans. We want to coordinate the flow of our construction traffic and our workers on foot so that they can navigate the work space safely. Now, I often find when talking with state agencies, they keep getting confused because we talk about internal traffic control plans, and as soon as they hear the traffic control plan, their brain goes back to what's happening outside. Well, by necessity, whatever we do inside the workspace has to coordinate with what's happening in terms of your overall traffic control plan, and that's your access egress. Okay, so now we shift to my playing with toys for a little bit. And I'm going to start out with an access egress issue. Give a minute for the camera to get up there so you can see what I'm pointing to. So here along here we have John Q. Public coming along 70 miles an hour. These things, by the way, are intended to be concrete barriers because I don't have any scale model concrete barriers. And so we have a break in the barrier, which is your very typical egress into the traffic. So here we have truck is empty, who's ready to leave. Got to make a sharp turn, look over the corner, and get from 0 to 7 miles an hour without getting hit. How many of us do that all the time? Only New Hampshire? I don't believe it. Come on, we all do that. Right? We put a hole, maybe 200 feet, which virtually is a right-hand turn for an asphalt truck. Okay, now I need some help. I should know this answer. Somebody please just yell out the answer. What's an empty asphalt truck weigh? 25 tons? 25,000 pounds. 25,000 pounds from 0 to 70. Is that in 4.3 seconds? I'm going to show you some photographs that show it even worse. What is an internal traffic control plane? Internal traffic control plane is how can we organize things? There are several things we want to do to make our work zone safer. As Jim mentioned, over half of the workers we kill with our own equipment. So what we want is we want specified places for our equipment and specified places for our workers to the extent possible. So I use these little yellow things to represent what we refer to as worker-free zones. So if this is going to be the path that your trucks are going to be coming in, that's an obvious worker-free zone. Okay, that makes sense to everybody? Because you got a truck coming in, uh-oh. Can you zoom in here? I'm going to drive you nuts because I have you zoom in. All right, there. Uh-oh. We have someone talking on the phone. Truck parked partially in the way of the trucks coming in. We've reduced that lane width by 2 or 3 feet. And he's totally oblivious to the fact that he's got a truck behind him until he blows a horn. How do I know that? Because there was one point when I was on a cell phone in that very position, and it was actually the QC who honked on his horn, I don't know, 4 or 5 times before I heard him. So we're all vulnerable to such things. So you might want to think about where do you park things. This is a performance pickup truck, and we're going to emphasize another point. The most important vehicle or equipment on site first thing in the morning is a performance pickup truck. Everybody congregates at that foreman's pickup truck because it's the foreman who basically says what we're going to do next. So imagine all of this equipment clustered together because that's where we parked tonight, and the foreman drives right up to it. Now what do you have? You have the mechanic truck brought in, you have half a dozen pickup trucks brought in, you have the tack truck brought in, you have maybe a loader brought in, and everybody's all congregated there. Okay. Then what happens is that truck's been released from the plant. Everybody goes wandering around, getting ready to move. And then all of a sudden you've got about a 4 or 5 minute period where you got 30 pieces of equipment with people walking around it that are moving to mobilize. So I would submit that if you have your foreman park somewhere away from the equipment, that you can actually mobilize in a more organized fashion. One of the things we want to do in our internal traffic control plan is design our flow of work so that we minimize the amount of backing to the extent possible. So that means we don't want our full trucks, I'm going to have to zoom out now. You don't want our full trucks having to come in this way, turn around, and then back a long ways. So to the extent possible, if you can bring it in from this way, that's fine. Do you work from the left side to the right side, or the right side to the left side? One of the things that we've observed is where's the driver of the truck? Where is the driver of the truck sit? Left side of the truck. Okay, so if you can have the trucks passing the paving crew on the right-hand side, if you remember the blind area diagram I showed you of the truck, you decrease the amount of area that the driver has to worry about where he can't see. Now, if you really want to make it complicated, this yellow right here just became a bridge. This just became a state inspector parked on the bridge. We're going to bring an asphalt truck in from behind. Excuse me, workers. The paving finished here and it's coming back to reset. Okay, so the paver's ready to go. What is happening at this time? Anybody know? Reset back here at the bridge. What's the very first thing they're doing? They're setting the ski on the side of the paver so that they can measure their depth. So you got a crew sitting right here doing this. Again, all this yellow represents the bridge for the moment. And then you get a truck that comes in. And he comes like this. You have that image? It happens. Actually saw somebody get hit doing this. Okay? The driver was stretching for all it was worth to look over his hood. He knew he didn't have much room. Oh yeah. He had an irate guy over here telling him, get your butt up here. So he's being waved through. And he's stretching. And he caught the rear end of the guy who was right here on the street, who was making the bolt adjustments. Okay? You know who got yelled at? Who got yelled at? I heard someone say spotter? No. Truck driver. In my opinion, the state inspector caused the whole problem. The state inspector had no business having a pickup truck anywhere near the working operation itself. When I say anywhere near, you ought to be able to walk 100 feet, 2 or 3 truck lengths. If he hadn't done that, this driver would have crowded this side here. In fact, we even learned we had to be careful where we stood on site. Because if we stood on the side of the road, we would see the drivers crowd towards the paving crew a little bit. So one of the things that's really important is making sure that everyone on site understands how they are affecting the flow of traffic on the site. So the basic concepts of an internal traffic control plan is there's usually some sort of drawing that says how do we want the flow of work to go, where do we want our vehicles to go, and they're in their notes. If you think of the MPTCD and their typicals, it's like that. The difference is rather than a traffic engineer drawing it out ahead of time, this is something that changes every time the operation changes. If you wind up with a plant shutdown and trucks coming from another direction, your internal traffic control plan changes. If you wind up changing from the left lane to the middle lane to the right-hand lane, your internal traffic control plan changes. If you wind up doing a milling operation, it's going to be different. If you're milling the shoulder ahead of what you're doing, or if you're milling at the same time, all of that's going to affect what you need to do. The only one on site who has the knowledge to organize and orchestrate, if you will, the movement of the construction equipment on site is a paving foreman. With input from the superintendent, with knowledge from the safety director, but we had all kinds of concepts of who was going to do an internal traffic control plan, and we found out that the safety director isn't on site often enough to do it, the site superintendent isn't on site often enough to do it, and the person who really is in charge is a paving foreman. But we don't want to give the paving foreman a report to fill out like this every day, and he ain't going to do it. So as far as I'm concerned, if he has a stick and some sand, I'm happy. It's just letting everyone know on site, where'd you come in, where'd you go out? We want the trucks coming in on the right-hand side. I mean, I remember being in North Carolina at one point when they were paving the middle lane. Some trucks came down the right side of the crew, some came down the left side of the crew. If we could have kept the trucks just on the left side of the crew, then the crew would have always been, on the right side of the crew, then the crew would have always been on the driver's side. And workers could have come out on the opposite side. I think
we don't always have that choice.
No, you don't. But it's something that should be thought about every time you make a move. Here's another little issue that requires a little knowledge in your internal traffic control plan. Make sure that your signaling is good between your paper operator and your truck driver, because there are 2 different signals. Let's dump your bed on one site. Let's get out of here. Needless to say, we saw this situation periodically. Big pile of asphalt from paver, not something that's particularly good. But now what do you need to do? You need to bring in another piece of equipment. Probably not that big. You may think it's a shovel, but your crew is a little smarter than that, because they will find a farm tractor, they will find a skid steer, they will find something. Well, maybe I was working with richer companies, because all of them had at least a beat-up farm tractor with a loader on it. I don't know, maybe one of the crews. But that operation itself should have its own little internal traffic control plan, because we saw a lot of exposures with the small pieces of equipment when you were doing cleanup operations. How are you going to deal when you get to the end and I'm going to run out of the camera here, so I'll just stop here. But when you get to the end of your lift, there's always a lot of handwork. Another situation where we saw a lot of concern was paver comes back. What's the truck driver trained to do? Back to the paver. Bring my roller up here. I'm going to be finishing a joint. Got a guy sitting here working, raking. This is a very dangerous situation. Truck backing to the paver. Okay, so we had an internal traffic control plan actually where the paving crew, before that joint started being worked on, actually parked their loader right behind the truck, so the truck couldn't back up. Until that joint was finished, that skid steer stayed there. So those are some little things that can be done. We kind of put together a 3-hour training course that goes through all the details here. Obviously, we don't have time for all that, but I want to just give you a few of those concepts, show you a couple of slides that deal with that access egress in particular issue. So we can shift over. Your internal traffic control plan, we do a lot of focus on the area right around the paving operation, where the paver is and where the rollers are. But it really covers your whole site. Whether you're looking at where the traffic's coming in and your access and your egress, where the paver is, your truck's actually in the queue delivering to and from. And don't forget about where you're staging your equipment. And how do you get your equipment from where it's staged? Think about the pieces of equipment that go with your paving operation. Your state inspector's truck, your foreman's truck, your tack truck. What about the intermittent operations, like when you bring in the water truck to fill the rollers, or when the mechanic comes in? How each one of those is a separate operation. I think in some ways, maybe if you want to simplify or think of the internal traffic control plan in sort of different terminology, it's the old job hazard analysis sort of thing. How do you build your internal traffic control plan? Well, you start with your overall drawing, what you're doing, and you break it down into manageable chunks. What is the paving going to be for today? What is the work that's going to be done for today? And then you look at what are the hazards that you have on site, such as the overhead power lines. You like where the vest was hung? This was just hung out to dry, I'm sure. How are you going to mark those overhead hazards or whatever other hazards? Make sure everyone on site knows what it is. How are you going to deal with traffic moving in and out of your operation and through and past your operation? What is the effect of things like pickup trucks on where your delivery trucks have to come in, where your asphalt trucks have to come in? Organize your flow work. Think about your intermittent operations. This is the truck of the QC guy who's coming in to take samples. He comes in 4 or 5 times during the day. He has to know where to be. And we generally leave that up to the experience of the crews that are out there in each individual, but we don't coordinate. One of the most important things with the internal traffic control plan we actually found, one of the things, most important thing about the internal traffic control plan that we found was in doing our training sessions, we got the paving foreman, the site superintendent, the person in charge of the employees for the state agency on site, and the truck boss. All into the meeting, we gave them training together. And we talked about what are the safety issues on site. And invariably, these guys have never talked about how they interact. They talked about production, but let me just give you one for instance. One of those cases, I'm going to drive you nuts. Come back here. One of these cases, the truck boss who worked with the company for as many years as the state superintendent and paving foreman had, about 15 years or so, said the most scary thing for him as a driver, and he still was a driver, was when he came in here, was when there was a worker in front of the screen. Scared to death that he was going to back out because of the angle of the truck and the amount of equipment of the street and being tucked in against the paver, that was the biggest blind spot, even if there was a direct line of sight for the truck driver. Of course, the paving foreman never knew it. What did the paving foreman do every time he saw a truck come? He stepped in front of that street. So just getting your people to talk to each other about what are your concerns, what are our joint concerns, and how can we best take care of that. What did he start doing on that site? He started stepping up onto the street rather than stepping in front of the street, which is probably the safest position for him to be anyway. Yeah, back. How are you going to deal with your communications on site and meetings? One of the things I talk about meetings. Remember, this is a moving process. I don't know how many times somebody comes in, it could be the safety director, it could be company vice president, somebody who's important, who's the first person they go to see, they go talk to the foreman. And then you've got a group of 3, 4, or 5 people having a meeting right there on site. And they're in a safe place when they start that meeting. But they talk for a few minutes. And the paving operation moves on. Next thing you know, they're sitting there in the middle of the road in the way of the asphalt trucks. Cell phones, we have found from looking at video that this is how a cell phone is answered. I don't know. We didn't see that on site. They plug their ear, they put their head down, they put the cell phone to the ear, they take 5 to 10 steps, then they look. And that happened on multiple sites. And it was just weird how they showed up in the videos that we had. So you might want to talk to people about how they use cell phones. I would love to invent the button, not to mention get the royalties, that can hit the button that says, I am answering the phone, it will take me a minute to get to a safe place. Please be patient. So that I could put that button in my pocket, look around, walk to a safe place, and then pull it out and find out who it is. Now, on the other hand, from a company standpoint or from an agency standpoint, before you call somebody on site, and I shoot out my bosses on this, make sure you really need to talk to them, because every time that cell phone rings, you are putting them at risk. Intermittent operations and handwork should be a part of your internal traffic control plan. Skid steer is probably one of the scariest things on site. What about the other operations going on site? Coordinate with your other contractors. When this operation went on site, it certainly eliminated one source of delivering asphalt to the site. Visitors on site. In this case, this was us with our research trailer and our video trailer. You need to consider where you want them to go, how they're going to know what's going on. We tried, we begged to know exactly where people wanted us to come in and want us to do. And there was one morning when I was very embarrassed as I ran up on the rear end of the finish roll. He was looking at me like, what the heck are you doing here? So communication is important. Question came about how do you communicate to truck drivers and so forth? On site, we had one company that, although they don't use company radios anymore, they've installed CBs on all of their pavers, just their pavers. And they communicate to their lead truck driver through their CB, because all the truck drivers have CBs. I talked several years ago about it really good to have radios and have radio communication, and every contractor told me that wasn't possible, it wasn't feasible, it was too expensive, there's no way you can do it, they're independent contractors. We get out on site and find out that every blooming truck has a CB in it. So that actually we can have radio communication on site. Okay, and then the access egress. This is an access and egress from a median type situation. Again, kind of right angle turn, a little closer. Remember thinking about that 0 to 60 of that dump truck. We're going to put a nice loose gravel so that they can't get any traction at all. I couldn't with my truck and trailer either. You get traffic flying by. In this particular case, what's the sight distance? How well can your driver see traffic coming? And how well can the traffic see what's going on at your entrance and exit? There he is trying to come up out of sight. But the other part on the internal traffic control plan side is we work past those entrances. As we were data collectors, being out on site, we had to be very aware of where these entrances are. Because we didn't want to be standing somewhere where you got a haul truck fully loaded, pulling off the highway at 60 miles an hour, with no room to maneuver. Well, you want to control your traffic coming in and out of that as well. Oh, and let me back up. Here we've got the entrance. We have a pickup truck that's parked blocking part of that entrance. We have a worker who's walking across that entrance. And then we also have the little skid steer driving past it. So we have a lot going on in an area for a truck driver to deal with when he's trying to go in and go out. And by the way, that truck driver has to keep an eye on this worker on this side at the same time he's trying to keep an eye on traffic on that side. Those are the things we need to avoid. This particular site, I would have loved to have had them put all of the exiting into the traffic at the very end of the project, pave a chunk of that so that there was an acceleration lane on our side, the construction side of the barricade, so that they could see and at least get to 30 or 40 miles an hour. And then you can rip it out and you can finish it at the very end of the project. Is there money there? Yes. Okay, contractors, raise your hand if you think the money spent on 300 feet of asphalt built up for the length of this project might be less than killing a family of 3 in a lawsuit. State agencies, would it cost you less money to put in 300 feet of acceleration lane than to suffer the lawsuit if you killed people when the truck pulled out? So, this is putting the ski on in case you didn't know what I was talking about, but the other point is, in order to do this, it's long, it's heavy, it's awkward, it takes teamwork. In fact, this may be one of the best pictures of teamwork, thank you, Jennifer, that's out there. And that's really what you need to do in terms of your access and egress, is you need that teamwork between the contractor that's actually going to make it happen and the agency that's going to allow it to happen. And with that, there's contact information. I'll be around for questions. I assume that it's time for break.